The time has come to review my own site's cheat sheet. The RoboCoach cheat sheet you will not find if you type in 2019 free fantasy football cheat sheet. You used to be able to find it here. We were number one at one time. These days, you'll see ESPN, lineups.com, Fantasy Pros, and I've talked about all of them. I may cover some more. I did RotoWire. Um, but let's look at Fantasy Football Draft. Yeah, we were number one in 2007. You can read about that. Okay, so if I come into RoboCheat, I click here, and now this is the very first thing that you're going to notice about RoboCheat is that um, there's a bunch of acronyms. You probably don't know what they mean. WUP, RDP, ADP, maybe you know that one, but it may not be completely obvious to you what all these mean. So don't let that put you off. I'll explain it here. It's exactly what you need. So the first thing you need to understand is that you have a customized cheat sheet that these points that are being forecast that you see right here in the robo column are points for your league. So, not just some other league. You want it your league. So these points apply to you. And that is dependent upon a few things. It's dependent upon your scoring system. It's dependent upon your player position counts. It's play dependent upon how many teams are in your league. So that's crucial. So that's the first thing, and Robo has that, and it's set up on other pages, but it's incorporated here. So that's the first thing. The next thing you want is tier. So all that goes into making a tier number, which is basically a group, a cluster, just players with who are in the same tier are, for all intents and purposes, the same player. Because no matter what somebody tells you about their cheat sheet forecasts, and how awesome it is, and they have Excel sheet formulas, nobody has anything with the sensitivity to detect the difference between a 438 point forecast and a 434 and a 432 and so on down the list. So what RoboCoach has done here is giving you the tier, and this is telling us that there's one big giant tier of running backs. And that's useful information. I've seen some forecasts say that Saquon Barkley was in a cluster all by himself, but that's not what Robo is seeing. And this can change from day to day, depending upon, well, the mathematical technique underlying it is called clustering, and clustering is that's just the nature of the technique. It can find clusters one day and not the next because part of it is random. In any event, RoboCoach puts together 50 tiers, and uh, so he's saying that the instrument is sensitive enough to detect that somebody who's at 438 and somebody who's at 385 are probably in about the same tier. And that's a pretty wide range of like 50 points. So that's saying a lot. That's saying that all this nitpicking about who's, a little bit better or not a little bit better than a player, I'm sure can talk on podcasts for hours and hours about how Joe Mixon is not as good as Alvin Kamara. You sure about that? I mean, by how many points? And if so, is that, are they, is that close enough that they're in the same group? Yeah, That's what RoboCoach is saying here. He's saying this is a big cluster of people, and that can save a lot of time. And you can come in here. That's a huge advantage if you know that you can get Joe Mixon and Ezekiel Elliott. It will be pretty much the same player on a week-to-week basis. Joe will give you the same production because they're in the same tier. Now, the other thing you want to see is a VBD forecast, and that has to go with the customization. So VBD stands for value-based draft, and that's what you're getting here. It's explained in the column definitions below, and you can read about what VBD is. But it's critical. You want to have a VBD forecast, and that depends upon, it's basically the teams in your league times the position count gives you a baseline demand for a certain position, and that gives you a baseline for point forecasts. Without that, then you may, as none of this really means anything. And so the other thing you combine with VBD is ADP. So VBD is a point forecast for you. That's what goes into Robo. ADP is what's going in the outside world. So there's mock drafts going on every day, and so these numbers represent, Dalvin Cook's going 16, 14, 26, so on. So this is the outside, what the outside world approximately thinks of these players. And this is what you should think in the RDP column. And that gives you your next thing that you really want, which is customized sleepers and duds. And so you can see based upon the delta, that's what this column is, that the difference between their ADP and their RDP is right there. Red is bad, green is good. And so Derrick Henry, ADP 23, RDP of 5, is an 18-point green delta. So that's great. There's your customized sleepers and duds, straight up and down, simple math. And this tells you a sleeper and dud for your league because it's customized. And sleepers and duds for your league are going to be different than sleepers and duds for another league. So the other thing you want right there is to put all that information together into a WUP. Wait until pick. That's what this column is here, and that's the critical number, or maybe not the critical, but certainly one of the top 3 critical numbers. So Derrick Henry, you can wait until pick 19, and that's based upon the information I've put in for how many teams are in my league, etc. So this is saying that, based upon where I am in the draft and how many teams are in my league, I'll have to grab him with by the 19th pick. So with my second round pick, basically. So that's wait until pick. Now, some other things that you want to see are injuries. So I can see down here that Todd Gurley is injured. That's recently that information about his knee arthritis came out, and so there's a indication here that he's injured. And I want to see that in a printable cheat sheet. And then, of course, the depth chart. So if a player is suddenly disappeared from the depth chart, or they moved from one team to another and they're now at depth 2, you can see that. And what else do you want to see? Well, those are the critical things. Now, some things that you don't see with a lot of cheat sheets, especially the free ones, is depth chart assumptions. So these aren't shown in the Robo cheat sheet either, and I'd say that's a failing on my part. They should be indicated here somehow, but they're not. So what's a depth chart assumption? Well, one of the depth chart assumptions for that's set up inside of RoboCoach is what Nick Chubb is going to do. Is there going to be a running back by committee this year? And the answer to that is yes. RoboCheat has been configured to look at Nick Chubb as RB1 material for the first 4 weeks, but after that, it's configured to assume a running back by committee with Kareem Hunt. So I'll, in a separate video that I'll cover later, um, and then I'll update regularly each week the assumptions that go behind some of these players, especially when it comes to injuries and when they're going to come back. So that'll that that'll be a separate video. So look out for that. It'll be coming soon. What else there's one thing we didn't cover here, and that's hot and cold. And you can see some of these players have negatives and positives in front of them. Positives means they're going to be hot. So that's critical to know when you're looking at a bunch of players, especially like these players who are all in the same cluster, all in the 404 cluster or tier. It's critical to know that some of them are going to start hot and some of them are going to start cold. Now, if you pick up Mel Gordon and he has his first 3 games be his hardest 3 games, then that's a bad thing for you. But if you pick up any of these other players who are going to start hot, then that's a good thing for you. Um, so basically, what you can do is you can pick up these guys and feel confident that other things being equal, their tier being equal, that you can pick up based upon their hotness or coldness or these other factors. So that's critical information that you need to know, because you don't want to pick up somebody who's going to start the year and fall flat on their face, and then you want to trade them after week 3, but you can't because they've had such a bad start. So that's really useful information. So that's pretty much it in terms of what you want to see in a cheat sheet. It's all here with the exception of the depth chart assumptions. And it's all free and it's all printable. Maybe that's one thing I show you up here on the top. You can see print view, and then you can just go ahead and print that. And then you can see normal view when you want to use it as a web page. So one thing it's not really a critical thing is the top 200. You can see that with each cheat sheet is just by position. So there should be a top 200 cheat sheet that throws together QBs, wide receivers, tight ends, and defenses all together. So that is a drawback, one that I need to remedy pretty soon, something I've been meaning to do for a while and haven't gotten around to it. But it's still pretty useful because you can, compare obviously based upon their tier. So these tiers are the same going across running backs and quarterbacks. And of course, so are the point forecasts and the RoboDP. So you're getting it by position, but they are comparable. So I can see that the quarterbacks are in the 355 tier. And I remember from looking at running backs, they weren't up there. They were in like the 404 range. So quarterbacks are not as valuable in this league as are running backs. And likewise, if I click on wide receivers, I'm going to see probably pretty valuable wide receivers. I think this is a 3 wide receiver league and a PPR league. Yeah, so you can see the receivers really popped. And one thing I should note is a drawback with RoboCheat is you sometimes have to wait overnight to get your fully configured cheat sheet because it runs the calculations late at night, And it does give you some up-to-date information, but it does some custom tailoring at night that you won't get until the next day. So make sure you get in at least the day before your draft. You'll get a good cheat sheet if you do it on the day of your draft, but not as good as if you get it in 24 hours before. So that's critical to get all your scoring and league configuration done as early as possible. So that's interesting. Julio is number 1 and his ADP is 12. That's a big sleeper right there. And that's in my league's points. Useful to know. And what else can I tell you? I think that's about, I guess I have to give this a grade now. It's printable. That's key. Let me review. It's printable. It's got customization. That's critical as well. It's got tiers. It's got hot and cold. Let me zoom in so you can see that plus. It's got hot and cold. Terrell's going to start cold. You can avoid him because you can see that. It's got VBD forecast. It's got ADP. It's got customized sleepers and duds. It's got wait until pick. It's got injury information. It doesn't have the depth chart assumptions, and it doesn't have the all-in-one cheat sheet. But overall, those are holding it back from getting an A. I'd still say this is at least a B, if not a B plus. And here's something I'll do that'll make it an A, is that if you've gotten this far in the video, then send RoboCoach, Dr. RoboCoach, an email. The email is robocoach at FantasyFootballDraft.com. That's robocoach at FantasyFootballDraft.com. Tell me that you watched this video and that you would like a free subscription, and I will give you one. Just let me know what your registered email is for the site, and I'll respond back, and you'll have a free all-access subscription to Fantasy Football Draft and this cheat sheet. So please also like this video and please subscribe. Thanks for listening, and good luck this year.